afternoon. Today I'm going to be talking about the importance of using effective reading strategies in the classroom. I want to begin by talking about the importance of reading. A student's academic progress is dependent on their ability to understand what is read. Issues with reading comprehension can be seen not only in grade school, but also with college students. If the issue is not addressed at an early age, it can result in a lifelong problem, which is why we need to address this problem and find different strategies for these readers. Research shows a correlation between those who learn to read early and later academic success, which teachers, this is why we need to really find different strategies early on, especially in those elementary grades. And I'm going to talk about that a little more later on in some slides and give you examples of strategies that we can use. Research also shows that a large number of students who reach the 4th grade without adequate reading skills will end up on welfare or in prison. In order to obtain the skills needed to function in the 21st century workforce, good reading comprehension skills are a must. This just shows us how important reading is to our students. As teachers, we have to find strategies that work for all of these readers. There are so many different statistics on struggling readers. First of all, children who read 2 or more times per week are more likely to know their letters and actually read when they enter school. This shows us that we really need to encourage our parents to read to their child at home. By the end of 1st grade, struggling readers have only seen 9,975 words of running text, whereas proficient readers have seen an average of 18,681 words. This just shows you what exposure can do for a child. A child who does not read proficiently in 3rd grade is 4 times more likely to graduate than a student who can't read on grade level by 3rd grade. So that means this should tell our elementary, especially those younger grades, kindergarten, 1st and 2nd, how important it is to really teach reading to those students. Often students make adequate progress in the early grades, then begin to struggle again around the beginning of 4th grade. Research shows that there's a significant drop in reading scores of students between 3rd and 4th. One of the reasons for this is possibly because of fewer picture clues in the 4th grade text and the increase of new vocabulary words. Students with reading levels that are 2 or more years below those of their peers may enter special education, and usually when they enter special ed, there's going to be expected to maintain that gap or possibly fall even farther behind. It's rare that a struggling reader catch up to their achieving peers. Ultimately, low reading skills are a strong predictor that a student won't receive a diploma. In fact, research even shows that low reading skills causes more students to drop out of school than poverty. This again just shows us how important reading is to our students. We all know that there are many struggles that come with teaching. Looking at this slide, I bet you can all relate to many of these struggles. First of all, some teachers feel that differentiated instruction is the best way to improve reading comprehension. They also feel that they must have time to collaborate and share ideas so they can learn those new teaching strategies. However, many complain that there's not enough time to collaborate. As we all know, time is something that is so valuable to teachers and something that they don't get a lot of out of the classroom. Another struggle is that there's different levels and abilities in one classroom. It's hard to teach little Johnny, who's 2 grades above grade level, when you have Sally over here who's 3 levels below. Which student and which level are they supposed to teach on? It's very hard to do that. Teachers also say that they don't have enough information on the topic. They don't have enough resources. They don't know enough about it. They don't know enough strategies. Another complaint is that there are overcrowded classrooms. Many of the districts' budgets are cut, which means their teachers are cut, which means their teachers are getting more students, which means their classrooms are overcrowded. So that's a huge complaint from many teachers, that they have so many students they can't teach what they need to teach. They also feel like there's a lack of confidence. They don't feel like that they can, because they don't feel like they can reach these students because they don't have the knowledge, or there's too many students, or there's too many different levels. There's numerous reasons that I know we can all relate to at least one of these reasons that teachers really struggle in teaching reading. This slide is something that we all know about, but we don't always think about. The struggles from the student's perspective. Students are often feeling frustrated when they're lacking these skills, and they usually have a negative emotion towards reading, especially in a school context. They often have emotional breakdowns due to anxiety of being a struggling reader. Their identity decreases. Once they enter middle school, they relate their sense of self-worth to their success in school, and usually a struggling reader isn't going to have great success in school. They tend to reject reading achievement and think it's unimportant by grade 7 and 8. They're over it. They're unmotivated. They have no self-confidence. They simply do not care anymore because they were embarrassed in the early grades having to read aloud. They didn't get it. They don't want their peers to see. They are simply over it altogether. These students are the ones, and if you see the last point on this slide, these are the ones that will hide or act out. You have that student that just wants to be invisible in your class, and they're just hoping and praying that you do not call on them. And then you have that student that is the class clown, and we all know why they're being the class clown, because they're trying to take away from the fact that they can't read or that they can't do something in your class. Okay, this slide just simply lists many effective strategies that are available. I'm not going to go into detail about these. I'm going to go into detail on the next couple slides. But for one, be sure in the early years, if you're a kindergarten first or second grade teacher, be sure you're practicing the sound structure of those words. In all of the grades, using outlines and discussion of these keywords is vital to the child's learning. Using small group instruction, teacher modeling, peer tutors are great strategies to use. Give the students reading choices. Don't just make them read something that you would like to read, but think of something that they might like to read. Use hands-on activities when teaching, additional reading opportunities throughout the day, allow for think aloud opportunities, allow the reader to ask and answer who, what, when, and why questions, allow them to practice summarizing. This lets them kind of process what they are reading and really go over the reading, not just read it and not know what they're reading. Also encourage out-of-school reading and encourage parental involvement. On this slide, I really want to talk about how we would use these strategies. First of all, phonological awareness instruction is most beneficial when it's taught with the teaching of phonics or letter sounds relationship. Not just this, but teachers should show the students how to use the knowledge of decoding words instead of just teaching blending and expecting the students to make the connection themselves. Think aloud strategies should be implemented by asking teachers to confirm their comprehension aloud of the text. And this is going to allow the teacher to really check for that understanding and make sure that the student is understanding what they're reading, not just reading to be reading. Small group and modeling are great teaching strategies for teaching all subjects. Bringing in that small group is really going to allow the student to feel a little bit more comfortable about reading rather than reading in a large group setting. The modeling is going to allow them to hear the teacher read and hear a fluent reader and know how it should sound. Be sure to use centers for students for them to be able to choose their reading. In that reading center that you already have set up in your classroom, be sure that there are things that interest all of the students in your class, that they want to pick up that book and they're really interested in what's going on in that book. Teachers must incorporate word strategies to help students learn to recognize, spell, and learn how to identify the meaning of words. One way that teachers might do this is through a word map, which is an interactive tool that helps with understanding vocabulary. Teachers might use the word map before, during, and even after the reading in a whole, small or whole group. Pedestal words can be used to help students become more familiar with the topic chosen for a small group content area unit. List group label is an activity that a teacher might use before reading to build vocabulary and categorize words. It should be used in small groups with teacher support. Graphic organizers often probe deeper into students' thinking and often help with misinterpretations. And it allows the teachers to really understand if they're actually getting it by looking at that graphic organizer and seeing how they really placed their thoughts onto the graphic organizer. Direct explicit instruction, this is how the process should follow, and I wrote this on the slide, but I kind of want to go into a little more detail. It should go review and check of previous work, presentation of new material, provided guided practice, provided feedback and correction, provided independent practice, and finally provide weekly and monthly reviews. This simply means that the students get new information through meaningful teacher-student interactions and teacher guidance of student learning. Be sure that you're giving the students additional time for reading. This may be done after they're finished with the assignment. If they finish a test, allow them to read while they're waiting on the other students to finish the test. It gives them just a time. Any time that they can be reading is good. It's beneficial for them. Be sure to prompt the students to read aloud and converse about the text. Talking about what they're reading is so beneficial to the students because you're allowed to see if they're really processing what they're reading and if they're understanding it and comprehending it. Also, parental involvement. One way to get parental involvement really started is to send home books during the summer, and this may be something that you have to mention to the administrators in the schools, but allowing them to send home some books over the summer is a great way to really encourage that reading over the summer and at home at night. In this slide, I want to continue talking about how these strategies are being used in the classroom. First, teachers need to give students diagnostic assessments in order to form these small groups. This allows the teacher to see what levels the students are on and place them in the groups based on those levels. Begin with large group instruction when starting the lesson and then move and break the students up into those small groups based on their scores on the diagnostic assessments. Teachers should model sounding out words and then allow the students time to practice word sounds themselves, and then this would be a good time for the teacher to actually give them that feedback. Be sure to teach students what to do when they get to a word they don't recognize. They need to look for parts of the word that they know, sound it out, and then check that. They can do this in their head, or they might need to say it out loud, whatever works best for them. Discussing reading, teachers can choose a topic and have a discussion about previous knowledge, look over pictures and other clues about the content, help the students make predictions, have students read the selection, discuss what is read, and review that process. Another reading strategy is mapping, and this is where the teacher writes a topic on a chart, the students brainstorm subtopics and vocabulary, and then the students read and revise the map. Usually you would close this lesson with a discussion about the map and the reading. Another reading strategy would be the use of a graphic organizer. The teacher would model how to fill this in first, and then the students would read the selection and then fill out the graphic organizer. They could do this individually or even with a partner, however you choose to do it. You would end the student with summarizing the main events of the reading by using the graphic organizer that they just created. And again, this gives them a good way to organize their thoughts as a whole. I wanted to do an entire slide on response to intervention, or RTI, as we often hear it referred to as, because RTI is a strategy as a whole, but there are lots of different components that I just kind of wanted to talk about. First and foremost, it's defined as a service where schools provide layered intervention that begin in the general education and increase intensity. Students are placed in different tiers. If you look at the picture, Tier 1 is the research-based core instruction, and that's usually given in the classroom. Tier 2 would be your next group of students, and that's targeted intervention. And then Tier 3 would be that intense intervention, where it's going to be a really, really small group, and they're really going to focus on that deficit area of that student. All of these students are going to be progress monitored weekly or bi-weekly through a curriculum-based measurement. The goal of RTI is to prevent academic difficulties through effective classroom instruction and intense intervention. We want to be sure during RTI that we're using data that contributes to the process. So based on these scores that the students are, or based on these tests that the students are taking, we're going to look at the scores and use that data to place them in the tier. The success seen from RTI is individual and overall reading scores on standardized tests have been raised, and adequate yearly progress in reading has been made. So there's definitely success shown from RTI, and this is a great strategy that your school as a whole can use. Here in Jackson Madison County, we are all using this. We've just started implementing it in the high school, so everyone should be pretty familiar with this, but if you have any questions, I can go over this further. What's your next step? How can you use this presentation? I hope that you'll take the slides and the information that I've given you and really use these strategies in your classroom to help improve reading. Does anyone have any questions, comments, or concerns?
So why did you choose this topic?
I chose this topic for numerous different reasons. Being in special ed, I'm able to see lots of struggling readers. My son that I adopted when he was 15 and couldn't read, and it was really an eye opener to see how he looked at text. This past year, we spent studying the driver's test, and just we studied for probably 3 months at a time, and when I started giving him the questions, I would notice he could read the answers, and it was all about the exposure to the text. I think that kids just need that exposure, and I think it's our job as teachers to get that exposure to them. And as I mentioned earlier, be sure to encourage that parental involvement at home and encourage them to read, because I think that you'll really be able to see gains in their reading, and I hope that you're all able to use this in your classroom.